All right, guys, an impressive victory by the Green Bay Packers here in Week 3, again with backup quarterback Malik Willis, bringing the Packers to 2-1. Now that the game's over and we're a day after the game, we got to break down the PFF grades. So that's what we're going to do in this video, brought to you by BetUS. More on that here in a bit. Break down the offensive PFF grades, defensive PFF grades, as well as look at some of the advanced statistics we can see with those grades, such as pressures allowed, missed tackles, coverage stats, and all of that. It's nice to kind of look at those stats rather than just the box score a day after the game and kind of start to reflect on who you thought played well or who you thought played poorly and compare. Guys, go down and click that subscribe button if you happen to be a new viewer and enjoy this type of video. Among everything else Green Bay Packers you will find on this channel, from game breakdowns to injury reports, breaking news during the week, and live watch parties, you'll find it all here on this channel. Before we dive down into these PFF grades, of course, I want to give a massive shout out to this year's channel sponsor, BetUS. And right now you can get a 150% deposit match with code YouTube150 on your first deposit. And then afterwards, 125% deposit match on your next 2 deposits, all the way up to $2,000. So that's code YouTube150 on BetUS. Over on the site right now, the lines are starting to come out for the slate of Week 4 games. Obviously, the Packers take on the very impressive Minnesota Vikings here in Lambeau. There's no real money line yet. Obviously, they don't know who's going to be playing quarterback, and probably it's going to remain like that all the way up until Sunday. I'm assuming the Packers are going to do the exact same thing they did last week, but this week maybe Jordan Love plays. But the Packers do open as 3-point favorites simply because they are at home. But right now you can actually take the Green Bay Packers to win the NFC North, and they are the 3rd lowest in terms of the favorite. Right now the Detroit Lions are favorites at plus 140. Then you have the Minnesota Vikings, who are right now at the top of the NFC North at plus 180. And then the Packers at plus 300. And then you see the Bears at plus 1,200. Just wild, right? I'm going to place $50 for the Packers to still win the NFC North. I think they 100% can, especially going 2-0 with a backup quarterback. That would be $50 to win an additional $150. Guys, remember to always gamble responsibly. If you have any issues with that, you can reach out to me, or there's a ton of resources over here on BetUS. But if you do decide to partake in it, check out BetUS. They have a ton of different lines and, of course, the 150% deposit match offer. All right, so without further ado, let's dive right into the video. And before we dive into the Packers grades, I just wanted to take a look at the quarterback grades throughout 3 weeks of the NFL season, because this is just hilarious. So if we bring up the screen, you can see Kyler Murray, Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers at the top. So in terms of a top 10 PFF quarterback grade through 3 weeks, you have Sam Darnold at number 5. You have Justin Fields at number 7. And you have Malik Willis at number 10. So via PFF, Malik Willis is a top 10 PFF grade. And that's not where it ends. And this is where it gets even funnier. If you scroll down and keep scrolling and keep scrolling and keep scrolling, Caleb Williams as the 30th ranked PFF quarterback at a 48.3. Man, the jokes just write themselves. All right, so now diving into the PFF grades, Packers versus Titans. Starting new this season, I've been pretty much predicting who I think is going to be at the top and then live reacting to it, essentially. So I haven't looked at these yet. I saw a couple tweets here and there, but I still wrote down who I think is going to be at the top here. On offense, I have Emmanuel Wilson, Malik Willis, and Zach Tom. And then on defense, I think it's going to be Jair. Devontae Wyatt, I thought, had an excellent game. And then, of course, Kingsley Enagbare had an awesome game. So let's start on the offense. And the top players are Josh Jacobs, Emmanuel Wilson, Christian Watson, Malik Willis, Zach Tom in terms of the top 5. So I didn't get the top 3 exactly correct, but at least I got my 3 guys are all in the top 5. Josh Jacobs at number 1 is a little bit of a shock. Poor pass blocking grade, but Emmanuel Wilson, I'm glad this reflects what I said yesterday. I think he's been an excellent pass blocker at that running back spot, kind of that 3rd down running back they can put in there in shotgun and feel comfortable with him picking up a blitz, which he did excellently yesterday. Josh Jacobs, I mean, he would have been the leading rusher without those holding calls, but at the same time, if you're holding, of course, runs are going to look better. But I didn't think it was an overall bad game by Jacobs. I think the runs that didn't go for anything, there wasn't great blocking on the interior, but both running backs here at the top. Christian Watson, as the highest graded wide receiver, checks out and made an excellent contested catch on the right side. I think that first drive, and then that 3rd and 18 across the middle of the field. Also a very impressive catch. Malik Willis at number 4. I mean, you got to give credit to Malik. Last week, you could argue, okay, Josh Jacobs, tons of rushing yards, kind of put the team on his back. Malik didn't have to do much. But this week, like, Malik put the team on his back. And, hats off to him. He played excellent football yesterday. And, also massive credit to Brian Gutekunst for going out and making this move, trading for Malik Willis. I don't think it's any exaggeration to say if Sean Clifford and Michael Pratt were our quarterback for these last 2 weeks, we'd be 0-3. Like, I really don't think there would be any other way. Like, I don't think we would have won either of these games with either of those guys at quarterback. Malik just really made it happen both weeks. And also credit to Matt LaFleur for making an excellent game plan to allow these players to succeed and put them in a position, the best position to succeed, which he did. Zach Tom, 72.9. I mean, he's been such a great tackle for this offense, and him and Lane Johnson are the only 2 tackles in the NFL so far to not allow a pressure and have 100% pass blocking efficiency. And some could argue that Lane Johnson has allowed a pressure. If you go back week 1 against the Packers, looks like he let up a sack against, I believe, Rashawn Gary. They might have tied it to the running back, but Lane Johnson kind of just like missed him and then let him run right by him. So to me, that's a pressure and a sack allowed, but they don't look at it that way for some reason. But to me, Zach Tom is the best tackle in the league, and he will be all-pro. Sean Ryan with, I believe, his best game on the season, which is a little bit of a shock to me. Watching that game live, I was like, oh, not a great game by Sean Ryan, but his first full start, and he has a great game, and that's against, Jeffrey Simmons and T'Vondre Sweat, the new defensive tackle they drafted this year. So that's very impressive. I'm glad to see this. He started all 63 snaps at right guard because Jordan Morgan was out. He had a great game, 80.3 pass block and an above-average run block at 66.1. Jaden Reed, it's a big drop-off after that. You're in the 70s, then you drop all the way down to slightly above average with Jaden Reed. He should be higher than this. I thought he, had a good game. Obviously, he wasn't utilized a crazy amount because, again, the Packers didn't need to pass a ton of, that first play, and then you have a couple of run plays. I thought he did well. Malik Heath, 58.0. Nice to see him get some snaps at 11. Bo Melton, 17 snaps, 56.8. So now we're getting below average here. Romeo Dobbs, 56.7. Josh Myers, 54.5. Hasn't really had a good season start so far. I mean, you see this, a 50, then a 60, then a 54. He's only been average about just last week, and that's it. So then keep going down the list. You see Rasheed Walker, who, had a rough week 1. Last week I thought got better, and then this week was bad yet again. You see that 47.6 run blocking, including those 2 holding calls. He's got to clean that up, man. Way, way too many penalties from Rasheed Walker so far this year. Musgrave actually graded higher than Tucker Kraft, which is a little bit of a surprise to me, but Tucker Kraft also had a very bad drop. But you see Musgrave with that pass block, horrible pass block grade. Pretty bad run block grade, surprisingly higher than Tucker Kraft, even though there was this one run play where Musgrave basically ended up tackling, I believe, Josh Jacobs in the backfield because he got shoved into him. So a little wild that Musgrave has a higher run blocking grade than Tucker Kraft, because I feel like Tucker Kraft has been excellent in terms of blocking, in my opinion. So it's kind of a shock to see both of these guys down here near the low 50s. Elton Jenkins at a 51 is a shock too. I mean, the 2 penalties, it makes sense, but I thought he played better than this. Pass blocking 64, run blocking 55. I guess that in 2-year running was more of an issue due to Elton rather than Sean Ryan, which maybe that's the case. I mean, Elton is a pass blocking type of guard, where Sean Ryan more of a run blocking type of guard, even though, his pass blocking grade was the better one this week, but he still had a pretty good run blocking grade. Chris Brooks, whatever, had 4 snaps. Tay Wicks, man, another disappointing game here. He had 3 catches last week. I'm like, all right, way to bounce back. And then this week, low grade, low run blocking grade. You hate to see it. I think he does, again, bounce back next week and could even lead the team in receiving yard. We'll see, right? I don't think this is any testament to Tay Wicks' 2024 campaign. I think he's going to turn it around. You guys know how much faith I have in him. And I still very much believe in him, and especially when Jordan Love comes back, I think he's going to be more utilized in the offense. And then Ben Sims at the bottom, only 2 snaps, but a 46.9. Then if we take a look at pressures allowed and sacks allowed, they don't have a single sack tied to anyone on this team. I believe Malik Willis went down 3 times, but it's likely, he tried to extend the play and kind of like ran into a defender. So they're probably not going to tie that to a sack to a lineman. That's my guess here. But in terms of pressures, Elton Jenkins allowed 2 pressures, 2 hurries. So that makes sense, I guess, for his lower grade. He did allow the most pressures on the team. Josh Jacobs allowed a pressure. That makes sense for his low pass blocking grade. And Rasheed Walker did allow a pressure. And of course, those 2 penalties. Had a great pass blocking grade, but only allowed 1 pressure. I think the run blocking was definitely a lot of the issue there. 47.6. All right, so now let's check out the defense PFF grades. And again, the top 3, my guesses are Jair, Devontae Wyatt, and JJ Enagbare. And let's see, Jesus. Okay, I actually got that spot on. I mean, it makes sense. It's kind of an easy pick here. Like when you watch this game, if you were to write down your 3 standouts, I'm sure they would be very, very similar or the exact same. And this checks out. I mean, I was talking all week about why is JJ Enagbare getting all those snaps. I'll gladly eat crow because, man, what a game by JJ Enagbare. And that's with 2 missed tackles. He still has a 92.9. That's very impressive because when you miss tackles, it tanks your tackle grade, and generally that tanks your other grades. And he didn't even have a great run defense grade, 52.4, but where he was excellent was, of course, rushing the passer, and that's why his grade's so high. 3 total pressures, 2 sacks, 3 stops, a forced fumble. I mean, the dude balled out. Probably his best game as a Green Bay Packer, if we're being completely honest. And then Jair. I mean, it was a simple cover 3. He just sat on the top of that route, and for some reason, Will Levis threw it. Was no coverage disguise. It wasn't any weird play by Jeff Hafley drawn up. No, like it was just an awful play by Will Levis. But Jair, great job diagnosing that in a cover 3 deep third and jumping a curl route and getting his first career interception. We'll take a look at receptions allowed and all that right after this. Devontae Wyatt, I thought it was, again, one of his better games as a Packer. I've said that twice now this season. He's had an excellent start to 2024. He had 3 pressures and 2 sacks. Preston Smith, 4 pressures and 2 sacks. Xavier McKinney near the top here. He's been insane. I saw a stat on Twitter earlier. Xavier McKinney has more interceptions than catches allowed this season. That is insane. That is absolutely insane. Carl Brooks near the top here. He had 2 pressures. I didn't see him with 2 pressures during the game, but I guess, a couple pressures ended up in sacks, and Carl Brooks might have been that immediate pressure. He's been good so far this season. Edgerrincooper near the top here. Didn't miss a tackle. That's why you see that low tackle grade, but had a pressure, had a sack. Lucas Van Ness, a pressure and a sack. Man, the Packers had so many pressures. 20 total pressures, and it says 9 sacks. I guess because they're tying some... they give them 1 sack rather than a half a sack. So the Packers obviously had 8 sacks, but PFF, I think, gives only full sacks to players and not half sacks. I'm not exactly sure there. Eric Stokes, 63.5. I thought he had a good game. Rashawn Gary, 3 pressures, 0 sacks. I know I was kind of talking down on Rashawn Gary a little bit in my game reaction. It's because... people are like, oh, he's getting double teamed. He's not. He's really not. Like, he had plenty of 1v1 reps versus Petit Frere, and he's like the worst tackle in the league and got benched in this game where he got stonewalled. And then one of the very next plays, Enagbare comes in and smokes Petit Frere, absolutely murders Will Levis, and forces a fumble that the Packers get the ball back. That's all I was expecting from Rashawn Gary, to do what Enagbare did. And yes, he's getting pressures every game, and that's awesome. But you kind of expect the sack production as well. And I'm not saying Rashawn Gary's been awful this year, but I'm just saying I've expected more from him. And I think we can all say that, in my opinion. He also had 1 stop. He hasn't been bad. When we talk about players that have been bad through the first 3 weeks, we could talk about, Quay Walker, Kenny Clark, which we'll get into. Rashawn Gary just hasn't been as good as I thought he would be. Going through this offseason and whatnot, and the matchups that he's had, especially this week. Like, I expected a 2-sack game from Rashawn Gary, and albeit the Packers had so much pressure and 8 total sacks, and it just so happened it wasn't him, and he did have 1, and it was offsides on Preston Smith, which didn't really affect the play at all. I get it, but I did expect more this game. Nixon, a 62.2. Evan Williams, only 4 snaps. I just don't get it. Get this guy on the field. Ballantyne, a snap. Isaiah McDuffie, 59.0, had a missed tackle, but also had 6 total tackles and 3 stops. I'll take it from him. TJ Slayton hasn't been too great this season to start, but he only saw 15 snaps here. I mean, you see Carl Brooks getting 26 snaps and TJ Slayton getting 15. Kind of tells you what the Packers want from that defensive line room. Javon Bullard, one of the lower graded players this week. We'll get into targets and receptions, but didn't really record a stat, like no tackles, no misses. Coverage grade of 53.0. Not crazy good, but hey, the Packers only allowed 14 points. Kenny Clark, 44.5. It's been pretty bad. If we go into his overall grades this year, I mean, it's been bad. And again, the PFF isn't the end-all, be-all, and a lot of times they don't like Kenny Clark, and they grade him bad. He hasn't missed a tackle, which usually is his grade killer. So, you see the run defense better this week, but abysmal week 1 and 2. And pass rush, it flip-flopped. Has been decent the first 2 weeks and was bad here in week 3. So you expect a lot more out of Kenny Clark as well. Yeah, I thought he'd be eating in this new scheme, this Jeff Hafley defense, and it simply hasn't been the case. Eric Wilson only saw 8 snaps. We saw him have like the greatest grade of all time last week, and here he has one of the worst grades on the team this week. It's just the inconsistency, I guess. I don't know. Only 8 snaps, where last week I think he saw 7 or 8 as well, so a little interesting there. And then, of course, you have Quay Walker. I think he's getting a lot of hate right now, and he's getting more than he should, but let's face it, like, he has not played well. Like, at the mic, he just hasn't. And that's not saying Quay Walker isn't a great player and can't be utilized correctly and put in a position where you're like, wow, Quay Walker is balling out. It's just not the mic. He can't play mic. And I don't know how long they're going to keep trying it for. And right now, you could argue, hey, the Packers really don't have another option at mic. Sure, you could argue that. I think Tyron Hopper, honestly. But then it's like, who do you take off when you bring on Tyron Hopper? Do you take off Isaiah McDuffie? Do you take off edgerrincooper? You know what I mean? Because they're not going to be running base too often. So they're kind of in a hard situation right now. He did have a pressure and a sack, and he had 4 tackles, and he didn't miss a tackle. So I'll give him that. But the main gripe with Quay has been his coverage and his diagnosing at that Mike spot. And a 29.7 coverage grade, I think, exactly reflects this game. I thought he was awful in coverage. A lot of times he was just in no man's land in his zone and didn't track anything. Like, when you're in a zone, sure, you want to stay in your general zone, but you at least want to track a player that's near you in your zone. You don't just want to stand away from them and just stare at the quarterback. Like, yeah, you're watching the quarterback, but you got to have a little bit of awareness around you. And hey, tight end crossed my zone. He's doing a deep, stop route over the middle. I should at least track that to the edge of my zone, right? He's not doing that. And it's definitely been a problem. All right, so now let's take a look at coverages and receptions allowed. We'll start here with Eric Stokes. He allowed 6 receptions on 8 targets, 45 yards. So I thought he had a good game, and, he did allow 4 receptions on 4 targets for DeAndre Hopkins. That one touchdown wasn't on him. I think it was a great coverage. It was just a great throw and a tremendous catch by DeAndre Hopkins. Overall, I was pleased with Eric Stokes' play in this game. I mean, the Titans barely passed the ball. Like, they didn't do too well, so, he did allow 6 receptions here, but for only 45 yards, it's not that bad. McDuffie allowed 7 catches on 7 targets. I didn't realize this. I mean, I know that 1 touchdown was definitely on him, but 7 for 7, 63 yards. Man, our linebackers can't cover anything. Like, right now, it's bad. Like, just put Evan Williams in there or Bullard in there, just someone. Oladapo, who was a healthy scratch. I mean, if you're going to have your linebackers tasked with covering slot receivers or tight ends, at least make it a guy that can do it, right? Isaiah McDuffie, no one's going to sit here and be like, yeah, this is a coverage linebacker. Let's make him cover. Like, Isaiah McDuffie is a thumper style type of linebacker, downhill, stop the run, make a tackle. That's what he is. So, he's going to get beaten coverage. Where Quay, you're kind of like, all right, he should maybe be covering a little bit better. Jair allowed 5 receptions on 7 targets, 45 yards. Of course, had that pick 6, so that kind of highlights his day of, oh, he had a great day, but he did still allow 7 receptions or 5 receptions on 7 targets, but still, again, not that bad. 1 to Vanett, Boyd, Burks, Ridley, and Okonkwo, 0 to DeAndre Hopkins, who only got targeted once with Jair on him. Javon Bullard did allow 2 receptions on 2 targets, 27 yards. Eric Wilson, 2 on 2 for 31, explains his very low grade. Xavier McKinney did allow 1 catch, but also, of course, had the interception. It was only a 15-yard catch to DeAndre Hopkins. You see Quay Walker, they only tasked him with 1 catch on 2 targets for 20 yards. Hard to say. I feel like he was more responsible for like 2 or 3 catches than just 1. But again, this is subjective. Like, when you're watching a play and grading it, it's like, all right, that was this player's responsibility, and he allowed that catch in this zone. It's a little bit subjective. You have to, if you don't fully know the play the Packers are running on defense, it's kind of hard to tie certain receptions to certain players. At the end of the day, Quay Walker didn't cover well. edgerrincooper allowed 2 receptions on 2 targets for 14. Nixon didn't allow a single reception. Hey, He's been playing pretty well, I'm not going to lie. People hate on him for his coverage skills. He's the only corner that didn't allow reception in this game, guys. So he had a good game, and he's good against the run, like coming up making a tackle. He's been good. So those are the coverages here for Week 3 versus the Titans. And of course, quickly wanted to take a look at special teams grades. We have Evan Williams at the top, 76.5. With Robert Rochelle had a tackle, Eric Wilson, Xavier McKinney had a tackle, Zane Anderson had a tackle on special teams. Some of the lower graded players, Matt Orzek. Javon Bullard, LVN, Aaron Mosby, edgerrincooper. But at the top, Williams, Kraft, Rochelle, Wilson, McKinney. Yeah, I was surprised to see McKinney on that one kickoff. Came up, made a tackle. I'm like, why is Xavier McKinney on kickoff team? Like, especially when this new dynamic kickoff has not been that. Like, no teams. I don't even know. Has a team scored on a kickoff yet? Like, in the NFL? I haven't been paying attention to other teams in regards to this, but it doesn't look dynamic at all. Honestly, it's way worse. I mean, maybe it helps against injuries, which is great, but it's just boring now. So those are all the grades. Week 3, Packers versus Titans. They head to take on the Minnesota Vikings here in Lambeau in Week 4, and we'll see if it's going to be Jordan Love at quarterback or yet again Malik Willis. Regardless, I think the Packers, I think they bode well here. Minnesota has a great team, and their defense is ferocious, but I think Matt LaFleur will have a plan against that defense. And then on the flip side, they also have allowed a lot of pressure, similarly to Tennessee. So I think Jeff Hafley can kind of reach into his bag, pull out some pressure packages, and maybe try to fluster Sam Darnold a little bit. I think that's what they need to do. But I appreciate you guys coming by to the video. Reminder to check out BetUS to get a 150% deposit match on your first deposit with sign-up code YouTube150. But I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching, and as always, go Pack Go.